guys, welcome back to the S.U.R.E Parenting Podcast, where every mom deserves to feel sure of her parenting. I'm your host, Sandy Bell, creator of S.U.R.E Parenting and author of S.U.R.E Parenting Building Blocks to Create Their Best Childhood. Here on the podcast, we address the issues that make moms question themselves or their kids, and we discuss creative solutions that meet the needs of each unique mother and child. Let's dive in. This week, we are going to cover a couple of posts that have come up in the group regarding 4-year-olds. So the first one reads, what is an appropriate way to discipline a 4-year-old that doesn't follow directions to just about anything she is asked or told to do? I truly try to be nice in giving her the attention she needs, but she constantly pushes my buttons. It's almost as if she goes against anything her dad and I ask of her. When I ask why she didn't listen, she says, I don't know. I'm extremely frustrated all the time, and I don't want to be that crazy mom. Please help. So, first and foremost, I am super proud of you for reaching out and asking for help because nobody wants to be that crazy mom, and it is extremely tiring and exhausting when you feel like you are just repeating yourself endlessly and getting nothing as far as results. So, you are not alone. 4-year-olds are doing exactly what their brains are making them do. And that often means doing experiments. It means trying to suss out where their individual self ends and you begin, where their needs and wants are different than yours, and which is going to take priority. And obviously, as a 4-year-old, they don't actually know the difference between needs and wants very well. So you might need them to pick up their toys, but they might need to keep playing. And that's a genuine need for them. So you're wanting them to pick up their toys versus their need to keep playing. It's probably not going to register. There's a whole bunch of comments, and I'm not going to read through them, but one of the things that did get brought up was that this one in particular, this child would just not respond. Mom would say, hey, turn off the water as daughter's washing her hands. And she wouldn't respond. She wouldn't do anything. So she'd turn off the water. Little one would flip out. Totally relate. I have that child. And there's a couple factors at play. One is that when they are super focused on an activity, it's going to be hard for them to hear you have it telling them to break that activity. So they're just hyper focused on what they're doing. And then in that moment, you perceived that she was done washing her hands, but she perceived that she was not done washing her hands. You mentioned, well, her hands were clean. Absolutely. Her hands no longer had dirt on them or food on them or whatever she was washing her hands from. But she wasn't done with the process. And that could mean she still mentally thought there was stuff on her hands. That could just mean that she was warming her hands up under the warm water because her hands were cold. That could mean that it was a sensory input thing and she was really enjoying the feeling of the water on her hands. That could mean that it was just fun and she was just having fun. And so, yes, when a 4-year-old will not hold a boundary that you have set, you're going to have to hold that boundary for them. But stepping back before you do that, one, check if they even heard you. You may speak very clearly and think that they heard you, but they're so focused that their ears are not processing sound in that moment, which happens a lot to my 4-year-old. And the way you fix that is by simply laying a hand on their shoulder, touching the back of their head, cupping their cheeks, putting your hand on the small of their back, some sort of physical contact so that they notice you're there. If you have a moment, ask them a question about what they're doing. By asking them a question and getting an answer, they are inviting you into their world. So you might say, hey, what you doing? You think you already know. You think, well, she's washing her hands, duh. But maybe she just invented a mermaid who lives in the sink and she's filling up the mermaid's home by letting the water run into these, empty bowls or whatever it is. In one of my webinars, I talked about a time this happened with my son, who's now 6, when he was 4, and I walked into the bathroom and the entire roll of toilet paper was unrolled in a pile on the floor. And I was fuming because we had already discussed this. I already told him not to do this. And he comes running in the bathroom behind me. And I took just the briefest of moments to notice him. He was excited. His eyes were lit up. And in his hands, he held Jake from Jake and the Neverland Pirates, and he held Captain Hook. And I said, "What you doing?" And he said, "Mom, I made Belch Mountain." And for those who do not have a 4-year-old who watch this show compulsively, in the cartoon Jake and the Neverland Pirates, there is a mountain called Belch Mountain, and it is a volcano, and it belches lava. And these characters have all kinds of shenanigans on and around this mountain. And so what I saw was a mess. And what he saw was Belch Mountain. And it's so important to take that step to see from their perspective. That is empathy. That's something we have the power to do that they don't have yet. They don't have the ability to think, oh, mom is probably concerned because it costs money to run water endlessly, and she has a water bill to pay, and the water heater is heating this water, and she has a gas bill to pay. They don't think those things. They think about what they're doing in that moment. It's one of the greatest gifts our children can give us is their ability to live in the moment. And we have to let them. It's not a gift if we don't accept it, right? So instead of just shutting it down, take just a moment and see what is it that she's accomplishing here. Because it's not nothing. It's clearly about more than just washing her hands, or she would have already turned off the water. So take that moment to really see what is it that she's doing. Now, if she looks straight at you and says no, okay, cool. I heard that you don't want to turn off the water, and the water needs to turn off. So you can do it all by yourself, or I can do it for you. And involve her in that conversation. She may then say, you might ask if you have the ability in that moment to say, why not? One of the things my 4-year-old loves to do is just shout no. But oftentimes I'll ask him, what does that mean? Because I have, my theory. I think it means you're being disobedient and you're being disrespectful and whatever other stories you might have running through your head. But this child might have a different idea of what that means. So if I say, what does that mean? Oftentimes he will be able to tell me, oh, I can't turn off the water because, whatever. The Octonauts are going on an adventure and if I don't have the water running into this bowl, then they're going to drown, or I don't know what the opposite of that would be. They have really silly games, is my point. And they will have reasons for what they're doing. Sometimes their reasons are because they're feeling disconnected from you. 4-year-olds in particular, as they're developing that sense of self and that independence, if they feel disconnected from you, they're not going to want to follow you. They're not going to want to comply because they feel disconnected. And it isn't so much just about being nice, but about really seeing them and seeing their world and acknowledging them as valuable and respecting their goals and what their perspective might be. And it's probably not going to be possible to always do that. I mean, in real life, we have jobs, we have bills, we have chaos, we have things going on. But at least once a day, stop and enter your kiddo's world. Really take an interest in what they're interested in. If you find that you are constantly correcting them all the time, this is creating a disconnect. Do you need to teach them? Absolutely. This mom says, what are appropriate ways to discipline a 4-year-old? I would say the most important part of that sentence is the word discipline. Discipline means teach. Discipline does not mean punish. Discipline does not mean to put somebody in timeout or take away their toys or do any of these things to a child. Discipline means to teach them. So if your concern is that they're wasting water, teach them about that. If your concern is that they are not picking up their things, help them, show them how to do it with them, challenge them to a game. If your concern is that they're saying no, ask yourself, why does this word no trigger me? What was I taught about the word no that I'm now using as a basis for how I'm interacting with my child? There's a video on our YouTube channel specifically about this because it is so important to let kids say no, to let them develop the skills it takes to say no. How many adult women do you know who struggle to stand up for themselves, who don't have the confidence, who aren't able to hold their boundaries? I know lots and lots and lots and lots, and many moms that call in to S.U.R.E Parenting are struggling with holding their boundaries. And part of that is because they were never allowed to practice. So when your 4-year-old says no, instead of feeling angry or feeling dissed or feeling disrespected, remember they're practicing these skills that they're going to need later on. And you have the ability to use this as a teaching moment. Oh, how interesting. You really don't want to turn that water off. Why not? What's going on? Involve your kiddo in that conversation. Now, can you always do that? Of course not. They want to run off in the street. You're not going to let them. You're not going to have a conversation about it. You're simply going to hold their hand and not let them run off in the street. And they might be enraged at you. That's okay, because feelings are okay. Your job as a trusted, secure leader is to hold those boundaries sometimes. But if you're fighting every day, something's askew. You shouldn't have to fight every day. It shouldn't feel like a constant battlefield. And if it is, that's where we want to kind of dig in and see what else is going on. So the other post that came up today was toy jail. If you left it out and I picked it up, I've got your stuff, you're out of luck. To get it back, do a chore, then it's yours just like before. This idea of if your kid happens to leave something out, then you get to take it away from them and they have to earn it back. And it was just what are your thoughts on this? I don't like this particular technique or strategy, if you will, because again, it's pitting us against our kids. Instead of, this is our home, these are our belongings, and this is how you take care of them. Here, let me show you. It's, oh, you made a mistake, so now I'm going to punish you. It's, you weren't perfect, so I'm going to make you feel bad. I'm going to make you do things you don't like. It just feels yucky to me. Anything that I can do to avoid pitting myself against my kids, I'm going to do, with the caveat that safety and health are never up for negotiation. So will I pit myself against my kid when it comes to them getting in their car seat? Absolutely. If that's a fight we have to have, it's a fight we have to have, because that's literally life and death. But am I going to set up a system where every day I'm making them feel badly for playing? Like, that doesn't sound good to me. So I get the idea. I get that it's incredibly frustrating when your kids leave stuff out constantly. But for one, we have to recognize we're dealing with very little kids here. This is, again, a 4-year-old that we're talking about. And so 4-year-olds have very little impulse control. They have virtually no executive functioning, planning out, follow through, all of those things. So to set up this punishment system, it just doesn't fit with the development of a 4-year-old brain. What we do in our family that I really like is family work. And what that means is at a certain time every day after dinner, we just cowl out. It's family work time, and we often start music, and then everybody starts picking up. And the kids put away their toys. The adults usually clean up the kitchen and the table and the counter. I usually fold up all the blankets in the living room. We just kind of return our house to order. And because we're all doing it together, there's no me versus them. There's no fight about it. It's just, this is how we take care of our home. You see how we do it together. Mom's doing it, dad's doing it, kids are doing it. We're all putting in an effort to make our home feel good so that we can live here and feel happy and not have anxiety because there's stuff everywhere. We all feel better when our home is tidy. Is it going to be tidy all the time? Of course not, because we also live here. And we can help restore our home back to semi-tidiness each night as an act of service to each other, as an act of respect for our things and our belongings, as an act of gratitude. We talk about that. And it's so important that we're doing it together. It's not me sitting there barking orders and threatening them if they don't do it. It's us as a family choosing to take on this responsibility together. And I think that's why it feels so different, and why it feels yucky to me to take something that is so good and positive and turn it into a conflict that just doesn't need to be there. Now, with that said, you have to be willing to simplify. Kids have way too much stuff. At least in the US, in 2020, kids have so much stuff. And it's overwhelming for them. If you have not read or listened to Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne, do yourself and your children a favor and go get it. It's amazing. But it's all about how hard it is for our kids to have this much stuff. We have an expectation of these kids that they pick up, but they have, in this instance, the mom says he has over 100 toy cars for one child. Well, of course he can't keep that cleaned up. I couldn't keep that much stuff picked up. It's just overwhelming. So narrowing it way down to the basic toys. I want to say, I read this book a couple of years ago, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it was something like 12 main toys or something like that. And every family's going to be different. Like you might hear that number and just be gobsmacked. But the point is to simplify, to get down to the basics of what they really enjoy, so that when you are talking about cleaning up, it's easy. There's 6 toys and 6 places those toys could go, and poof, we're done. Now we have more than that. Let me just be perfectly clear about that. But we do a toy rotation. So their playroom has on the wall a shoe holder, and they put their little action figures in there. And then there's a cubby thing with 6 cubbies and a toy box for Legos. So there's the Duplo Legos in there, and then they have 6 cubbies, so they can have 6 things in there, and they have the shoe holder for their action figures. And that's what can be inside at a time. If they want something from the garage, they have to take something out and swap it. Are they perfect at it? No, because they're human, and they're children that are human. So there's, a double whammy there. But they're really doing well with this idea. And at the very least, they can get it all out of the living room and back into their playroom, which with a baby sister is very important. As she's learning to crawl, them having little tiny pieces out in the living room isn't an option. That can, be very unsafe for her because, of course, like any baby, she puts everything in her mouth. So with a 4-year-old, expecting them, so the next post that came up was, what chores do your 4-year-olds have? And this is what I'm getting into now. So expecting a 4-year-old to do chores independently for most 4-year-olds is not going to go over well. Some 4-year-olds really are in a place where they love to be a little helper and they get all excited about it. Some 4-year-olds are simply upholders and they will follow through on your expectations because that's what they like to do. Most 4-year-olds will have a very hard time just doing chores for the sake of doing chores, which again is why I love family work. It's why I love the idea that we are a team and we work together. This isn't about you have to do these things because I say so. This is about what we do as a family to show our respect and our gratitude and our appreciation for our home. And it takes away just all of the fight. There's nothing to fight about. So all of that said, there's still going to be times when your 4-year-old just doesn't feel like listening. They don't want to. This is especially true if you are incapacitated. I noticed this when I was super, super pregnant. I had really, really bad pelvic pain, SPD, and what is that? I don't even know what the acronym is. I'm pretty sure it's SPD. But basically, my pelvis joints were like not aligned properly, and they were pulling apart too far, and it was really painful even to walk at the end of my last pregnancy. And so during that time, it wasn't a time I could stand up and take his hand and take him to follow through on whatever I had just told him to do. So he was saying no more and more and more. And one of the moms who posted, I think that there's a little bit of that going on because they've had this huge change recently with having a new baby in the family. And so what happens in those instances is that 4-year-olds, maybe more than any other age, need to know that they can trust their leaders. And they see the world very differently all of a sudden, and which means they're going to start to retest boundaries that you think they already know this, but their world and their perspective is very different. How they think about things is different. So they have to retest all those boundaries. And if they're testing a boundary and you are not able to get up and hold them to that boundary, then it's very disconcerting to them. It's very confusing to them. They're not sure what to expect anymore. And this happens if you're sitting on the couch just making commands and not willing to stand up and go. My 4-year-old keeps walking on the very top of my couch. And my mom's couch is always ripped at that top seam because my brothers would do this. They would jump over it or do whatever. So we have a rule that he's not to walk on the top of the couch. And he's 4. So in the midst of his play, he often forgets and he'll perch himself up on top of it. And I will tell him off the top of the couch. Feet on the seat is another more the positive version of that. So feet on the seat. And he'll say no. And it's my job then to walk over and pick him up and put his feet on the seat because it's important to me that he hold that boundary. Yelling at him and making a whole scene out of it, it's not necessary. His job is to test the boundary. My job is to hold the boundary. I don't need to be angry about it because I know that's his job. He's 4. And I'm able to use that knowledge to support him, and then he trusts me as his leader. And as he's getting closer to 5, the testing is less and less and less and less. My 6-year-old does not test nearly as often as my 4-year-old. It's my 4-year-old's job. That's his biological programming. That is what he needs to do to make sense of the world, to make sure that I'm his strong, confident leader, to make sure he can trust me, to develop and to grow. This is what he has to do. So if I know that and I understand that, I don't have to freak out about it. I don't need to be angry. I don't need to be mad that he's testing boundaries because he's supposed to. It's like being mad that he ate lunch. Like he has to. That's what he needs to do to grow. You know what I mean? He will test boundaries. One of the things he really likes to do is scream very loudly. So he'll just let out a screech. He knows they're not supposed to screech inside, but every couple of days he wants to test this. And I will remind him, oh, you can make that noise outside. He doesn't want to make the noise outside. He wants to make the noise inside. Sister's sleeping. So I will just walk over, hold his hand, walk to the back door, guide him outside, and say, get all your screeches out. When you're all done, come back inside. Was it last night or the night before? Outside, it's freaking cold, dude. We're in Idaho, and it was like 7 o'clock at night. It was pretty cold out. And so my husband told him, the same thing, like, hey, you can scream outside. No, it's cold. He goes, you're right, it is cold. You could scream in the garage. I don't want to. Okay, well, you could just not scream then. Those are your options. You can scream in the garage or not scream. And he thought about it a little bit, and he'll do this too, where he'll say, well, I'm just going to scream anyway. And I'll say something like, interesting, but I won't react because that's what he's looking for. He's looking for, like, what's the reaction going to be? And most often, if I stay calm like that, he usually doesn't do it. But if he does, then I'd walk him to the garage. But anyways, I wasn't there. I was listening though. I was upstairs and I heard this conversation. And I heard my husband give him this option, and I heard him kind of not want that option. And he's thinking about it and he's processing, and my husband's staying super calm. And then maybe 15 minutes later, we'd all moved on. And everybody wasn't thinking about it at all. And he runs into the garage. And we're like, what is he doing? And we hear him screaming at the top of his lungs in the garage. And then he came back in. He goes, I screamed in the garage. And he was all proud of himself. It was fantastic. Another example this morning, there's a new toy, and the toy, it can come apart, but it's not really supposed to. So he kept taking it apart, and I told him, that's not how it's intended to be used, and your brother's trying to use it the right way, so I need you to keep it together. I don't want to. I hear you. I know you don't want to. So that's important too. You want to empathize with them because those are real feelings. Whether you agree or not, it's still a real feeling. I hear you that you don't want to do that. I'm still going to ask you to do it anyway. And so he was angry. So he ran over and unplugged the baby monitor, threw it on the ground, the plug, which, woohoo. I mean, it's hilarious, the things that my kids will do that they think are going to bother me, that I'm like, okay, I can plug that back in. Not a big deal. But I didn't say that. I was just like, wow. That's all I said. Wow. And he storms off. And I said, I hope that you're feeling like a helper soon so that you can fix that. If not, then once I'm done changing sister's diaper, I'll come help you fix it. And he thought about it a little bit. He's standing outside my bedroom door, and I finished changing her diaper, and he comes running back in, and he goes, I feel like a helper now. And he plugged it back in, and we moved on with our day. A lot of it is giving them the space to kind of act a fool and then bring themselves back, and trusting that they'll do that. Now, the 4-year-old now, he's my second 4-year-old. So a lot of it, I just kind of know that this is part of the process of his learning and developing, so it doesn't concern me. Whereas with my first, it was a lot more concerning because, especially if you've gotten some ground as far as cooperation and then something changes, like disequilibrium, which happens at 4.5, then you are met with this shift and you feel like you've lost something, and it makes you almost panic. But it's totally normal, absolutely age appropriate, and it is something that they will work through. The best things you can do are to trust the process, remain calm, hold the boundaries you need to hold, work really hard to see from their perspective. Remember that they are doing the best they can with the current brain that they have. And you guys are going to work together to have more and more and more peaceful days. If you need help with your particularly challenging 4-year-old, please make sure that you set up a free call at bit.ly/callsammy. I am happy to discuss the challenges that you're facing and help you come up with some custom strategies that fit right for you and your kiddo. Until next time, talk to you later. Bye.